So the weather in the garden is a lot more mild and calm this week than it was last week, which means I can finally get out and do some of the jobs that I've been just so eager to get started this year. And one of those jobs at this time of year, when there are no frosts forecast on the horizon, there may be surprise frosts, but for now it doesn't look like there's any on their way. I'm relatively safe to come outside and start cutting back some of the cold, damaged growing points on my tender and half-hardy plants. So no matter what plant you're growing, the process of removing cold damaged material is exactly the same. And we're going to remove all of that damaged growth because it's a way for pests and disease to potentially get in. So removing it is going to help keep the plant as healthy as possible. Now you'll see next to me, this Schefflera taiwaniana has these cold damaged leaves. But because there is still some green on the foliage, it's still photosynthesizing and feeding the new growth. So I'm going to leave these on until my new flush of foliage has come out, and then I'll remove these because these will slowly die, and I don't want, as I've said, pests and disease to spread up into the main stem of the plant and then down. But for the time being, they're fueling that growth. Now, I imagine it would still push out leaves if I did remove these because there's going to be some energy stored in the cells of the plant, in the roots and in the stem. But this green is just helping feed that fresh spring growth for the time being anyway. So plants like this abutilon, and this is a cultivar Apfelsine, which is that really nice orange flowering one, was left outside all winter long, which means that the growing tips, which you can see here, have been damaged by cold. Now, although it's pretty unsightly at the moment, this isn't a problem for the plant at all. With a bit of tactful pruning, we can restore this, and with the warm weather that we're now experiencing, it's going to grow away really, really happily. So just grab yourself a sharp pair of secateurs, and you'll see quite clearly on the plant, you've got this damaged brown dead growth. If you can't see it visually, just give it a gentle snap and you'll get that sound. And if there's no green inside of the stem, you know that the cold's got to it. So we're just going to cut back that dead growth until we get to fresh green growth. And then from these points, the fresh points, we'll get lovely new growth. Now with abutilons, they have a tendency to get leggy anyway, so I don't mind cutting it back. Even if it wasn't damaged by frost, I would cut it back relatively hard to encourage a much nicer kind of growing form in this season. So I'm going to keep cutting. Nope, still dead, still dead. Now I've got some green there. Let's see if it picks it up on the camera. So there's green just inside the very tip of that stem. But I can see down here that there's new growth emerging. And we've got green stems here and green stems here. So I think what I'm going to do is just cut back to this point. Remember, this is a node, and nodes have all of the growth hormones for plants. So by limiting the growth down to a node, it's going to encourage the plant to produce lots of new growth, and we'll get a much fuller plant. And with the abutilons, the more stems you've got, that's more flowering material. So hopefully we'll have loads of blooms as the year rolls by. It's just like that. So you can see, hopefully, we've cut back here. I've done it at an angle away from the node so that if any water does land here, it's going to run this way and not sit soggy around the new growing point. We've got a growing point here and here, and it's already reshooting from here. Now, it looks pretty harsh, but as I say, abutilons get quite leggy anyway, and you can give any tender or half-hardy plants this treatment. At this time of year, that's when any risk of frost is hopefully past. And the reason we do it when frosts have passed is so that when you do get that tender new growth, it's got time to mature and become much tougher before any cold weather, which hopefully isn't going to be until autumn now. If we get frost on this fresh new growth, it's very, very susceptible to cold damage. And we're just going to keep, like a game of snakes and ladders, moving forward and then taking 2 steps back. So just letting the plants sit in that slightly damaged state until, for me, it's about mid to late April, and then I can cut them back. And this should really, really start growing away nicely now. I'm going to give this a feed because it's growing in a pot. First, I'm going to feed it with something that's high in nitrogen, something like liquid seaweed or stinging nettle fertilizer. And then to encourage flowers, once it's got lots of leaves, I'll switch over to something high in potassium, something like off the shelf liquid tomato feed, and that will encourage lots of those colourful blooms. Cutting back plant growth that's damaged by cold weather conditions isn't just limited to woody shrubs. We can do it for our hardy evergreen herbaceous plants as well, things like ferns. So I've got what I think is a Dryopteris fern here. Now in mild winters it stays evergreen. You can see I've still got some green fronds, so it provides a bit of winter interest, but they don't get through winter unscathed. There are brown tips and some dead fronds here. But just as with everything else, as the weather's warming, there are new fronds emerging and slowly unfurling from the centre of this plant. So now's the perfect time for me to start cutting these fronds back. Because if I do it now, I reduce the risk of me snipping off some of that fresh new growth. And it's going to let loads of light in there for those new leaves to green up and grow really, really well. So I'm just going to get as close to the knuckle of the fern as I can, and I'm just going to keep cutting away and reducing the fronds. So the 2 clumps of ferns I've got either side of me here are a bit of legacy planting from when this gravel path that now leads through this side of my garden used to be a running water stream, but we had so much trouble maintaining that stream, and when we got a dog we were worried that she was just going to rip it apart, that we got rid of the stream and turned it into a gravel path instead. But I left the clump of fern on that side and this side because it still quite nicely flanks the path. And actually that was about 2 years ago, and we built the stream 4 years ago. And sitting here on a still day like this is just nice, remembering how many iterations my garden has been through, and it gets me a bit excited to think how many more times I can change this. I mean, one of the things that has come out of working in such a limited space is learning to be resourceful with what I've got available. And I've measured this before, I think it was 4 to 6 meters, this planted area. And I can cram in so much. I mean, you've seen it in the height of summer, and if you haven't, hit subscribe because I think it's going to be very, very jungly this summer. But it's just nice to know that even in a limited space, a small garden or a balcony, we can all grow some of the plants that we love. And don't forget, we've created a dedicated website, growparadise.social, which is a miniature social network and an information forum where if you've got any questions about plant identification, garden design, anything growing related, that's whether it's house plants or garden plants, you can go over there, create a free account and start a discussion in one of the forums, and everybody can jump on board and help each other out. And the goal is that that's going to act as an information resource to help everybody, no matter where they are in the world, grow their own patch of paradise. Right, I need to tidy up my mess here, so I will see you all in the next one.